Alright, so I'm in the truck. I'm going to start the tuning process. I said I was going to start it today. We're not going to do much today because it's already like 8 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is just work on like startup and idle. It does start in idle fine, but it's pretty lean. It's like off the gauge lean. But I'm running a 3-bar map sensor with 1-bar scaling and decapped injectors with factory. It's a complete factory tune and decapped injectors and E85. So gonna adjust for all that stuff and try to get it to read a little bit better at idle, and then I'll probably go do some driving stuff tomorrow. But basically what I'm going to be doing in this video is taking it from stock file, changing some things. It's going to be a open loop speed density tune. So I'm going to disable the O2 sensors, turn closed loop off, fail the MAF sensor, change my scaling, and then just try to get the fueling decent. So that's what we'll do. Alright, so first thing I'm going to want to do is put the key in, and then we'll read the file. So we're going to just start completely fresh. Alright, so vehicle power not detected. I'm going to check my OBD2 fuse and make sure that that's okay. Alright, so I did end up having a blown fuse. Sometimes you get change or stuff inside the cigarette lighter adapter and it blows the fuse. So it went through and read the file like I showed before, and then it's going to ask you to license it, and you can do all that stuff. So then this is basically what the file is going to look like when you open it up. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do, I have this saved already, is 2005 Escalade stock tune. And then I'm going to go save as right away. And I'm just going to go to current file. I'm going to create a new folder for this Escalade. We'll call it Datalac. And I'll say today's date, 10/22, maybe idle file or something like that. So this will be the one that will start to change. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the operating system, because I'm going to change it to a 3-bar system. So if you're not familiar with any of this stuff, like if we go into airflow and VE table, you can see it's only set up for 1 bar right now. This should go to 300 kPa when I'm done with it. So we're going to want to change this thing. So first thing we do is go into operating system, and then we can see what options we have. So this has 2-bar or 3-bar. You might see 2-bar or 3-bar real-time tuning. There's a couple different options. So I'm going to go speed density 3-bar, apply code modification, and then it gives you some instructions here. Save the file with a new name, close the current file, open the new file, and then write entire. So let's do that. So first thing we do is save the file with a new name, close the current file, open the new file, and then write entire. So let's do that. Save as, save the file with a new name, close the current file, open the new file, and then you can see in the operating system we don't have any options here. But now in the VE table we have 320 kPa we can go up to. So this is basically your scaled 3-bar file now. Your linear and offset is changed, and now we can write entire, so we can put the 3-bar file onto the ECU. So now what I can do is I can take this thing right away. We'll go to write vehicle, and we'll go to write entire. We'll click write. It says brickable on there because you can mess up the computer if it like loses power or anything happens during this writing process. It will basically brick the ECU. So there's nothing electronically that you can do. There's ways people can fix them by like taking it apart and fixing the board. But it's a hardware change, not a software fix. So just be careful. Make sure you have good battery power. Don't leave your headlights on. blower, all that stuff, because it takes a little while to do it. So if you have kind of a weak battery, it can be unhappy and mess up your computer. All right, so now it says write complete. We can close. And then I think what I'll do right away again is I'm going to save this as a new file. And we'll just call it 1022 3-bar decaps 7875 Walbro 450. Working file. All right, so this will be kind of where we want to start. So as far as basics go, it's already idling. So that's a good thing. So what I want to do is just check some basic stuff. So I'm going to go through the tables. We'll go general. Depending on the computer, you might have to do air pump stuff if it has an air pump, but a lot of the stuff I'm already kind of set up on. That's already disabled. Idle. My idle's already pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I think where I'm going to start first is I'm going to make sure that my O2 sensors are disabled. So I'm going to go to fuel and then oxygen sensors and then closed loop enable. And then I'm going to max this out. You can see down here the max is 285. So I'm just going to take this whole table and then go to 285. All right. So now that table's maxed out. So closed loop shouldn't come on. And then I'm going to go to short-term fuel trim open loop. I'm going to disable short-term fuel trim. Cat or temp protection, I'm going to disable that because I'm not using cats. So, and then fuel general, the big thing is going to be changing flow rate because I changed the injectors. So you can see how this is scaled from 24 to 27. It's because it doesn't have a vacuum reference regulator on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a similar scale, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to like 70 and then 75. And then I'll just interpolate between the two. So we'll leave it there. So that's the fuel injector size change. Everything else should be pretty much the same for injectors because I'm using decaps. And then I also want to fail the MAF. So I'm going to go to engine diagnostics. And then I'm going to go to airflow tab. And then I'm going to set this MAF frequency fail high to 0 hertz. So if it sees anything above 0 hertz, it's going to fail the MAF. So in order for this to work and then fail into speed density properly, you have to go to the diagnostic trouble codes tab and then make sure P0101, 102, 103 are, I'm going to set them to mill on first error. Don't disable them. Keep them on mill on first error. Second error would be fine too. I just normally do it this way. And then turn the SES lights off. And then while we're in here, I'm going to take the O2 sensors and then I'm going to disable those. Just because I shouldn't see these errors because I have closed loop disabled, but I just don't want it throwing any codes. So we'll just make sure that it doesn't. The rest of the vehicle is like pretty much stock other than this. So Shouldn't have to treat it as a swap because the rest of the stuff in the truck is pretty much still hooked up. So there's not a whole lot of codes that we should have to go through and disable. So maybe we'll start there. So basically for the speed density, we'll make sure 102, 103, and 101 mil on first error so that it does throw the code and then it'll fail into speed density. And I think what I want to do after this is just save it and see what it does. So we change injector size. We're going to fail the math. We disabled closed loop. And then we should be able to kind of start running through the VE table and making some changes once we get it up to temp. And I'm just going to double check the spark table and see what the spark table looks like. So yeah, that should be okay. It's already got pretty low timing in it up here in this range. So I'm guessing with the scaling of the injectors, it's probably going to be pretty close to this 120 in boost, but we're not going to get into the boost in this video. So I just want to double check it and kind of see where everything is at. So another thing to keep in mind too is I have E85 in this, so my fueling is going to be a little bit off. So if I do want to scale it, I might end up scaling it using the injector size, but we'll get into that if I have to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this file. And then we'll write it and see where we're at. So we're going to go to write calibration this time, not write entire. So we'll close this and then we'll start the truck and see what it looks like. All right, so we'll give it a start. All right, so now it started and it didn't want to stay running, so we might actually get to play with some idle stuff. So I'm going to look at changing this map sensor linear and offset. I don't think that's right compared to what I was using before. So what you can do is go up to compare and look at old files. I want to say this should be like 320-ish, if I remember right. So this is from my truck 3-bar right here. So if we look at compare, you can see this is green now. So if we look at the compare file, it's 329 and then -6. So we can do it one of two ways. We can copy it over, or we can go over to this little show differences, and then you can just make this 0. And now they'll both be the same. So I'm going to start there. So I'll write the file again, and we'll see if that makes any difference. All right, so I'll key off, key back on, and then I'll see if it starts and stays running at all this time. So still started and died. All right, so now my next move is, I think what I'm going to do, because it's E85, what I might be running into is it might not have enough fuel now. So I can try this one of two ways. So I'll try this way. I'll just take the whole VE table, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by 1.3, and then I'll increase the whole table by 30%. I'm not going to save the file, but what I can do is I can write the file, and that'll be able to tell me if it's off fueling because it's E85. And I'm thinking that might be it because it did run before when it was scaled wrong. So let's see what this does. If this starts and stays running, I think what I'm going to do is scale it with the injectors. So I'll undo this change and then scale with injectors. Alright, so we'll close that file. And then now we'll see what it does. So I'll key off for a little bit. And then now we'll see what it does. So I'll key off for a little bit. Alright, so battery did die. So I did the read and then the right entire and then probably 3 other writes. So it was probably sitting over there with key on for maybe 10 minutes total, and the battery is already didn't want to start the truck. So that's a good example of why it's good to be on a charger or have a good battery, because you could be stranded with a dead battery. That's happened with me before, just doing a couple of writes. Or if you're doing a right entire, that would brick the computer. So I'm gonna let it charge up a little bit and then we'll try to start it. There we go. So it's a little bit happier with the fuel in it. So it's idling now around 17. So it is lean. It does need more fuel. So it's definitely just because of the E85 scaling. It's basically thinks it's running gas right now. I don't have the flex sensor hooked up. So that's why. So I'm going to adjust the injector size. All right. So like I said, I didn't save this change before, so now I can undo this change knowing that it was happier with more fuel in it and it was idling around the 17. I'm going to undo this change because those numbers were starting to get pretty high in the idle area already. So this is like 50. I usually like to see like 40s, 50s in the idle area. So they were already hitting 70, close to 80. So I'm going to leave this here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the injector size and then I'm going to scale it with the injector. So there's two reasons that I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to change it by 30% to change it for the ethanol. So we'll go 0.70 and then multiply. So that's going to take 30% off of the injector size. So this is basically going to scale the tune. So if you've heard that term before, and there's another reason for doing that, and that's so you don't run out of resolution on your spark table. So your cylinder air mass only goes up to 1.2 grams. So depending on the injector size and how it's set up, you'll exceed 1.2 pretty quickly and you won't have any resolution for your spark table. So you'll basically just be relying on this bottom line for spark. So what you can do then is reduce the injector size or scale the injectors and scale the tune so you can keep that resolution. So that's why I'm going to do the injector size instead of just adding fuel into it. So I'm going to save this and then I'll write it. All right, so that's completed. Now we can start it up and see what it does. All right, so one other thing I wanted to bring up here is the speed density. So when the math fails and goes into speed density, when you write a new file, sometimes it doesn't throw the code right away. So I'm going to try to do it here. It'll probably start and die a couple times. And then you can hear it sometimes if it stumbles and continues to run, then it'll like catch itself and then it'll run fine. So let's see if it does it this time. So see how it kind of stumbled, like it wasn't really happy. So as you get the fueling closer, it will throw the code because it'll continue to run. But if the fueling's off a little bit too, it's going to fight you. It's going to fight itself a little bit because it's going to want to stumble and die and it's not going to run long enough to throw the MAF code for speed density. So now I'll start it up again once the code is active. See how it doesn't stumble now. It just started and idled. And the first time it was like rah, 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 and then it idled smooth. So we're getting a little bit closer now. So should be good. So I think another thing I'm going to do before I start it is I'm going to look at the spark tables. So your high octane and low octane, they're usually different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them the same. But I'm also going to take this like idle section and I'm going to put this to like 18 degrees of timing because it was kind of, it's at 26, a little high, I think, for idle. So then I'll interpolate this. It's not really a huge deal, but I'm just going to make like a big idle section where it's all the same timing so that it's not trying to adjust itself. Like if it starts surging or anything like that, it's going to be changing timing, and especially if you're changing fuel, like you can kind of chase your tail. So then I'll copy this whole thing and I'm just going to paste it into the low octane table. That way they're both the same. Alright, so I did try to start it with this. My camera died, my other camera died, but I did try to start it with this. It was a little bit lean, so I'm going to add 10% in. And then we'll write it. So a lot of this process is just going to kind of be the same. Like once you get it to a point where it starts and idles, you just kind of watch the wideband and see where it's at and adjust fuel. Make sure you're up to like engine operating temperature and start making some adjustments. Alright, so that's really about it. I didn't really, like I said, didn't really change a whole lot. I did raise the idle up a little bit. It's stock cam though, so it does like to idle around 600 and it's fine. Usually with a vehicle with a cam, it would idle a little bit higher. I did set it at 800, so it's really just rescaling, making sure you got your 3-bar set up, map sensor set up, and for speed density failing the MAF, make sure that goes and make sure that works. Enable the codes. It has to throw the codes for it to work properly. Skilly injectors, put your injector size in, and all I really did was, from what you saw before, was adjust the fuel by like another 5%, and now it's idling where I want it to and ready to go drive.